Welcome to the Real News Network. I'm Mark Steiner. It's great to have you all with us. Voting rights goes to the heart of our very democracy. Using race to abridge those rights was commonplace in our country. And gerrymandering districts to disenfranchise another political party is as old as the Republic itself. Now, North Carolina Republicans have gerrymandered their legislative and congressional districts to ensure that Democrats cannot control the state's political future, despite the fact that Democrats are in the majority. Common Cause took them to court in Common Cause v. Lewis to challenge the gerrymandering of those districts. In the course of their case, they've discovered documents that clearly show that Trump's administration lied when pushing for a citizenship question on the 2020 census. They may seem disconnected, they're not. So what seems separate is really connected, and the future of our voting rights are on the line. And we are joined by Bob Phillips, Executive Director of Common Cause North Carolina. And Bob, welcome. Good to have you with us.
Thank you, Mark. A pleasure to be with you, too.
So let's talk about this. For our viewers, very quickly describe your original court case and this discovery that was made in the course of your fighting for a totally different, not disconnected issue of gerrymandering in North Carolina.
North Carolina has been number one. We like to think of ourselves as number one in basketball, but in this case, too, we're number one in gerrymandering. And we've actually got two cases, Common Cause v. Rucho, which was argued before the U.S. Supreme Court.
Right.
We'll get a decision later this month, connected to a similar gerrymandering case out of Maryland, where, as we were saying, one is, in our case, Republicans gerrymandering Democrats. The Maryland case, Democrats gerrymandering Republicans.
Right.
But the Common Cause v. Lewis is very similar. It is a challenge of our state constitution, saying that lawmakers engaged in extreme partisan gerrymandering on the legislative maps. We are in discovery. We don't go to trial until mid-July. And in the course of discovery, we were fortunate enough to get the 75,000 files from the mastermind, a guy named Thomas Hofstetler, who had really gerrymandered maps all around the country, but also in North Carolina. And recently, our attorneys discovered this memo that sort of linked Hoffler to the census and the citizenship question. And so that's kind of how this thing has today hit the news in a big way. We are seeing that the man who was rigging maps for a partisan advantage was behind the same, I guess, kind of effort to rig the census for a partisan advantage.
Well, it's interesting. Let's cover this for a bit here, because there's a number of interesting aspects to this. First of all, his daughter, Stephanie Hofeller-Lizon, really was estranged from her father. So she inherited all of his files, went through his files, found this information, and brought it to you. I guess, A, it shows you better stay close to your children, what they might discover about you, and tell the world. But so that's literally what happened, right? She found these files and gave it to you all in the course of your work, working around the gerrymandering issue. Is that right?
Mark, it was really the day after the holiday break in early January. The phone rings in my office, and on the other end of the line is Stephanie Hoffler. I didn't know who she was, and even when she made the connection, I wasn't sure why she was calling. And honestly, she was calling really about another legal matter. She lives outside of North Carolina. Her mother still living here, and she was in need of some legal help and felt like there was no one in this town whom she could trust because, as you've mentioned, she was estranged from her father. It led to multiple conversations. We were actually trying to assist her, just as, you know, being nice people, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And over the course of several conversations, we learned she had these files and then was willing to share with us. The lesson I kind of took out of this was always pick up the phone, even if you don't know who's on the other end of the line. It's worth picking it up and answering the call. And so that's what we did. So
let's go through just a little bit of what her files, the files that she gave you that her father had. They really, I mean, and we showed a bit of this, but let me read some of this that we just showed, and we can put that back up and let people see it. I mean, so what they showed was that when they made these, when they testified in court, that they lied, that the Trump administration people, Attorney General Gore and others lied on the stand. They testified that they drafted the initial, this letter to request citizenship in October, early November in 2017. It was actually done before that. That he testified that Dr. Hofeller said, when they asked him a question about the citizenship question in January 2017, he said, Mark, you need to make sure that we take a good census, that the administration doesn't skimp on the budget, is all he said Hofeller had done. when in fact, Hofeller ghost wrote the Newman Department of Justice letter that outlined it all. And there's so many other things here that he was one of the people that they relied on Hofeller for expertise on voting rights when that was not, and they denied doing that. That Hofeller told him that citizenship question would maximize representation for Latino community, when in reality, what Hofeller wrote was the opposite. That we could dampen down and make sure that white people have the vote and Latinos and blacks don't. So, I mean, these were out and out lies that were told. So, I mean, it's just mind-blowing that this stuff was revealed. So what does that mean? Where will this take you?
Well, you know, it's pretty serious when you're committing perjury before Congress, which indeed it looks like this could be very well the case. And this was what was filed in a brief today at the New York District Court where this Census citizenship case originated. But, you know, it's you want to say it's shocking. And in today's world, who knows really how people are reacting, but it's outrageous. I'm angered by it, as every American really should be, that this was not about what the officials in the Justice Department and Commerce Department have been saying, that was about better enforcement of the Voting Rights Act. It was all a sham, a plan to try to dilute the voting strength of, in this case, Latinos and other minorities who, you know, granted, might be intimidated by this question of, are you a citizen on the census? Something we've never done. We've never asked every person living in this country that question. It's been done in small samples, but never done to the entire universe of people. So it's terrible. Certainly our hope is that the United States Supreme Court, and my understanding is that a filing was going to be made earlier today to provide them this evidence. And even though that case has been heard, the oral arguments were made April 23rd, still, this is very relevant information. And my understanding is that the U.S. Supreme Court can certainly take this in, and maybe it alters the opinion they come out with, or maybe one of the justices decides to peel away, you know, from where they are now. I mean, all that's speculative, but again, for those of us who are deeply concerned about this, you know, our hope is that maybe this might change what a lot of people have been anticipating as sort of a 5-4 decision that would come in favor of the Trump administration. So we just have to wait and see.
So, I mean, that was one of the questions I was going to ask you, is we just don't know how this will play out. I mean, they could very well say that the arguments have closed and we can't take this new evidence in. But this new evidence, it would seem to me, if the Supreme Court had to hear it, could affect ruling in favor of a citizenship question on the 2020 census. I mean, this is one of the most critical findings I've heard about in a long time, and you literally stumbled across it. I mean,
we literally did. I mean, my understanding is this information, you know, kind of came to light within the last week. So timing-wise, you know, we were not able to provide it in a timely fashion because we didn't know about it. We didn't realize it was there. But still, you know, this case has not been rendered by the high court, and they have certainly time. Again, I'm just saying this as a citizen. I don't know any inside information, and I'm not an attorney, but to take this evidence, thoughtfully take it in as they ultimately make that decision.
So one last question, because I'm really curious about how you all think about this, what your internal conversations are about. I mean, if you take this case, the one that you have pushed in North Carolina around gerrymandering, that kind of pushes black folks and minorities and Democrats into districts where they cannot gain representation because of how they redistricted the state itself. And then you take this case about the citizenship question on the U.S. Census, which could, in fact, mean, as Hofeller himself has said, which is why he did it, to ensure that Latinos don't vote and they're not counted, which can change the nature of districts so that the Democrats and others will not have their due in Congress, other places, as Republicans would. I mean, this, to me, if you combine these things, can go to the very heart of our democracy, the heart of what voting means. It's like turning all the struggles around voting rights on its head, as they attempted to do when they used the Voting Rights Act to justify using the citizenship question. You know, so I think this is what's happening here is, I mean, it's monumental in terms of what the future could hold.
They are linked. I mean, the census is all about an accurate count for apportionment, as well as the distribution of federal dollars. And to think that this was some plan crafted perhaps right here in Raleigh. I mean, this is where Dr. Hoffler lived. And again, that he was responsible for the manipulation and the rigging of district maps across the country, and then had a hand in this kind of a plan to rig, again, the census for the purposes of an advantage with redistricting to a particular party is, again, very disturbing, very frightening. And again, we hope it harnesses some outrage across the country.
Well, this is certainly eye-opening, and I will look forward to following this and talking to you all more down the line as this kind of unfolds, especially if we see if the Supreme Court takes up the evidence that you all have discovered. And Bob Phillips, Executive Director of Common Cause, North Carolina, thank you so much for joining us here in The Real News. It's been a pleasure to talk with you.
Thank you, Mark. Great talking to you as well.
And I'm Mark Steiner here with The Real News Network. Thanks for joining us. Take care.